I've always had this quality where it's really hard for me to be inauthentic. I know that might sound a little pretentious, but sometimes it doesn't work in my favor. I tend to say what I'm thinking, even if it's not the right moment or the other person isn't even ready to hear it. Over time, the skill I've had to develop is knowing when to express myself and trusting the people around me enough to hold space for it. Sometimes it's just not the right time, and that's okay. I think the reason I'm like this is because I'm a deeply sensitive person. When someone crosses a boundary or makes me feel really good, I feel it intensely, and I say something. That sensitivity also makes me well suited to practicing intimacy. I'd always rather have an authentic moment with someone than perform or pretend we're somewhere else emotionally. In this episode, I chat with Jason King about what intimacy really looks like, how we show up for each other and ourselves in a real way. This is Mask Off for Mask, and I'm Vance. Hey, Jason.
Hello. Good
How are you
afternoon.
doing?
Very
Or good
well, thank
morning for
you.
me.
Yes, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. This is the first time that we got to chat. So we were just chatting a couple minutes before this, and it's first time meeting virtually and chatting in person. So yeah, I don't really, I mean, I know that you work as a sexological body worker, but if you want to just say quickly like what you do and who you work with, what it's like.
Sure. Yeah, so my main focus is teaching Tantra. I run workshops and retreats right now in Europe, but I'm also going to be expanding into North America, and I focus on GBTQ men. So, really creating spaces for queer guys to come together and explore our bodies, our eroticism, and spirituality.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, and so I work as a somatic intimacy coach. So and I've actually it's we like you said how you're just about to work in North America because I think you're working on in Easton Mountain, right?
Yes.
Jason Jason Tantra.
The other
And I,
Jason.
yeah. Yeah, and actually cuz I just did a retreat for Himeros with Jason this past fall and was at Easton Mountain for the first time. It was really lovely experience. Have you been to Easton Mountain?
I've heard wonderful things. Really looking forward to seeing the community there and seeing the space. And yeah, this will be like my first time working or offering this work in the US. And I'm originally from the US, so it feels like a bit of a homecoming for me. And yeah, also like a big step. I've been living in Europe for the last 10 years almost, and I've learned a lot and, developed a lot of new skills. And so it feels very touching to be able to bring that back to my home country.
Yeah. And we were talking before about intimacy and bringing that up and what does that mean? And, when before we were talking about or thinking about talking about this, I think the one thing with intimacy, even when I say like I'm an intimacy coach, I think a lot of people get confused by what that really means. So I want to ask you, what do you see intimacy as, like as a definition?
Such a good question. I just ran a whole weekend about this and was like crowdsourcing from the group. So, what is intimacy? To me, I think the first layer is a feeling of closeness with another human being
Hmm.
where I can feel seen, I feel understood, I feel safe. I think that's like the broadest sense of what is intimacy. And there's many types of intimacy. So we often think of intimacy as being with sexual partners or with romantic partners. But you can have intimacy with anyone. You can have intimacy with a good friend. You can have intimacy with a family member. When you feel that you can open up and be vulnerable and be really authentic with that person, and that they see and welcome and accept you for who you are. And hopefully there's like a reciprocal sense of opening from the other person as well. That's where we develop intimacy. And this is the field of emotional intimacy. I can share my feelings. I can maybe share my fears or insecurities. I can share my desires or longings. And then we have physical intimacy, people with whom we might share physical touch that doesn't have to be sexual, but maybe it's just someone you can put your hand on their knee when you're sitting next to each other, or you can lean against one another, or you can just have like a really long hug. And that can also be a beautiful type of non sexual physical intimacy. And then, of course,
Hmm.
we have sexual intimacy, and I think you can have a sexual experience that doesn't feel very intimate, and you can also have intimate experiences that aren't necessarily sexual. So they can go
Hmm.
together, but they don't have to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a lot of us struggle with the intimacy part of being ourselves with sex, right? Or whatever even that is, if sex is, just cuddling, or if it's full on you're having anal sex, right? Within that, it's like, how can you be yourself and see what comes up? Like, when I work with clients, the one thing about it is, like, we always say the boundaries and what is okay and what's not okay before we start a session. But it's always like, that doesn't mean that that's what we're going to do, even within that. Like, it might be nothing today. And so it's like, how can you show up to any type of experience when you're with another person, whether that's just sexual or emotional? How can you just be yourself? And if that means that what you're feeling in that moment is like, I actually feel like just going really slow today, or I don't feel like doing this at all, like, right? Being able to do all that stuff, or know that you're going to trust that you're going to be yourself, or say your boundaries, or say what you need, what you desire, fear, all of that, right? But there's that level of trust that you need to have with someone to know that you can show up that way.
That sounds like you're talking about really being kind of in our truth of like, hey, this is what is true for me right now. This is what feels alive for me right now. And maybe that's like my desire or lack thereof. This is what I would actually really like. And oftentimes we do kind of pre-script our erotic experiences, especially if it's on Grinder. We're stating like, hey, what are you into? This is what I'm into. And it's almost like we're writing the film script before we've even met in person. And then we meet, and maybe I actually don't want those things anymore, or I want other things, but it's like, oh, the script has been set. And it can be hard to then change that. And so we kind of go into this like autopilot. And I think that prevents us from being really intimate because it feels mechanical. And
Mm-hmm.
stepping out of that and being like, hey, this is how I'm actually feeling right now, or this is what I would
Mm-hmm.
actually like. That those moments of vulnerable sharing really like open the door to a deeper sense of intimacy because our truth is revealed.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to think of like trusting people too, is because I know that, like, even for myself, like in my 20s, I really had to learn who I could do that with, because I mean, you can't do that with everyone, right? So I always say that, like, that's the element of safety of, like, you can express your desires, fears, whatever, but it doesn't mean that that person is going to receive that. You just have to know that, like, you'll be okay if they can't do that, or if they can't be that for me in this moment, and that's okay too. But a lot of times I think this, like, I'm not a person that ever was really into grinder hookups or scruff hookups without meeting the person and getting to know them, and it just always helped me feel more relaxed. But like sometimes, so I'm not doing that all the time to have many experiences with it, but I always talk to clients, and some of the things that I hear them say about the things that have been said back to them, or the rejection in almost I don't want to say cruel way, but like, and just being a way that's instead of just saying no, thank you, saying no, thank you because. And so I'm like, that's like, it's a really risky place to put ourselves in, right? Because it is like, it doesn't mean that you're going to be 100% safe if you're like, I'm just going to be myself, right? And those things still hurt, and it still feels like shit sometimes to be rejected.
Yes. Yeah, I do think there is an aspect of like discernment that one develops around, yeah, who is a good person for me to open up to. And as you said, not everyone might receive my vulnerable truth kindly. And very likely, if people are like learning this skill of trying to be more vulnerable, they're going to have experiences of what you describe of people not being particularly kind or generous, and that's just part of the learning. I feel, that's like how we develop this sense of discernment, and who are the people who, yeah, I can trust to open up to. And there's a bit of a trap here because one can also fall into the trap of, I can't possibly reveal who I am until I fully trust this person and know that I'm fully safe. And the reality is you'll never be fully safe. That doesn't exist. We don't live in a safe world. And so you have to take a risk. That's why it's vulnerable, is there's risk involved. And so the discernment then comes toward, when is the appropriate, or when is the best time for me to take that risk, and when might I want to actually be more careful, and that's something that I think we develop over years and years of experimenting.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, when you were in your 20s or whenever you came out, what was your experience with being vulnerable with other gay men, like, even as like friends, not even just romantic stuff?
It was a pretty foreign idea, I think, for me. Yeah, in my 20s I was not a particularly vulnerable person. And I think I felt a frustration because I really like depth. Like, I like thinking about things deeply, talking about things deeply. And I think I often wanted to have deeper connections, but had no idea how. And I would see like friends of mine or people in my kind of social group for whom intimacy seemed very easy, and they could be physically or emotionally intimate with like friends or even sexually intimate with friends. And it kind of boggled my mind because it just didn't make sense. I just couldn't figure out, like, how do they do that? How does that work? And it was really when I then started, my own healing journey, my own therapeutic journey, but especially doing more embodiment work, which was really focused on being able to actually feel my feelings, to feel what's happening in my body and articulate that and practice sharing that with others. Like, a lot of workshops, a lot of workshops, that it then became so much easier. And not just easier, but I also felt the incredible like sense of spaciousness and freedom and relief, because often when we're holding something in, we can feel the contracted feeling. You can feel the like tension in your own body and the stuckness. And so being able to actually like name that to someone, and then it's like, oh, okay, cool, so that's out in the open, great, how are you doing?
Yeah. I know sometimes I find that I mean, I grew up in rural Saskatchewan, so in a rural community, and that's just was something. I mean, if I look at my parents' generation, intimacy was not a word that people were using. Like people just didn't do it, right? That was just the way that it was. So, even just looking around my friends or people around me, I notice how much we struggle with intimacy because we don't have any knowledge or education about what does that actually mean, right? And even when I meet other guys or I've had conversations about like what do you like sexually, lots of times they'll use that word intimate, like, oh, I really like more intimate sex. And I think to them they mean more like affectionate, tender, and people translate that to that word. But I think a lot of time it's like, well, no, you can be doing BDSM and it can be intimate because you could be feeling these feelings of feeling seen or losing control that make you, or that touch on some trauma or wounds that you have that make you feel like that's the intimacy for you, right? So that's why I'm like, people just don't even really understand these things because it's never been a practice, right? I mean, even I don't know what you how you grew up, but like no one was talking about, oh, this is how you enter into relationships. These are the skills to be in relationships. This is how you talk about your feelings getting hurt, right? And so I think, you said something about like seeing your friends being intimate with each other. And I think for a long time, I used to see people doing that and thinking that I'm like, oh, why is that person so much love? Like, why do they have so many friends? And like, why don't people like me? And I think it was because I'm also a deep thinker and more sensitive person who likes talking about my feelings and like social issues. And a lot of people are like, that's too much. Like, I don't want to have to deal with that. And so I was like, oh, it sometimes I think we think the intimacy is, oh, look how many friends I have. Look how many people like me. When really it's like, well, if you have no depth to it, then is that really intimacy or is that just creating safe relationships where you're not pushing anyone's buttons and you're not going in too deep that you're going to cause issues, right?
Yeah, I really like intimacy because it's challenging, actually. I have a new workshop series called Raw Intimacy, and I chose this name because, as you alluded to, I think we often think of intimacy as being very soft, and it's considered like a very feminine trait, I think, for a lot of people. And so, especially for gay guys, there's often not a lot of appreciation for more like feminine traits in the bedroom. It's very emphasized on like hard, intense, masculine. And yet, I often joke that eye gazing is my kink. Like when I'm running workshops and people are in experiences of intimacy, there's a real intensity to that experience because it invites us into these vulnerable places and it's very edgy. And so I'm all about like really honoring and celebrating. It's like, you want an intense experience, come sit in front of me and let me look in your eyes, baby. That
Mhm.
this is where we get beyond the layers and the facade and into, again, that word truth. And yes, you're absolutely right. No one really taught us this. I think
Mhm.
especially for queer people, but also for anybody, most of us did not really get an education. And one of the things that I really love about being in the queer community is we're so expressive. And I think that like one of the superpowers of queer people is being able to kind of project our identities outward and, have these really like larger than life personas and take up space and do that as a way of demanding rights and respect. And
Mhm.
yet I feel there's often so much emphasis outwards that we are a bit underdeveloped in our ability to really yeah, feel our inner landscape. And that's the
Mhm.
whole realm of intimacy is inside.
Yeah, and do you think that sometimes that outward expression sometimes can be this that confusion again with like what intimacy is, where it's this confusion of I want to be loved and this is what I think I need to be loved, instead of being like, oh, actually I'm going to be myself. And that can be from the way that I dress and the way that I choose to make my body look, and it can also be like, asking for what I want or saying, hey, do you have a moment? Can I talk to you? Right?
So the question is, do we confuse intimacy with like our desire for love and kind of performing for
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I can definitely say for myself, the biggest confusion for me was confusing sex for intimacy. That like I had this desire, as you said, for love, for connection, for partnership, for belonging, and sex felt like the way that I could get that. It's like I want to connect with other men, I get on Grinder. Regardless of what it is I'm actually looking for on a deeper level, sex was the thing that was available, and that I saw, that I had examples of. This is what guys do with each other. And once I started to actually like separate these two things out and feel more of my feelings, I could get more nuanced of like, what do I actually want in this moment? Is it sexual pleasure, or am I looking for connection? Do I want to be held? Do I want to feel loved? And can I get into more of the specific thing, because then I'm much more likely to actually get what I want, rather than
Mhm.
like trying to use sex to cover all of these needs or desires, where I would very often leave an encounter and feel not really satisfied. Like, oh, I
Mhm.
thought that this would scratch the itch, but somehow the itch is still there.
Well, yeah, that's what I was just about to ask you, is that do you think you were enjoying the sex that you were having when you were in that space that you were just talking about?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, that was the thing. I've had a lot of grinder sex. So like
Yeah.
I've had some great sex, I've had some really not good sex. And I think that it's important to note that you can still enjoy the sex and still feel dissatisfied afterwards. You can
Mhm.
have an experience that's like physically really pleasurable and still have this deeper level or deeper layer of like, and there's still more that I want. And so it doesn't have to be like, oh, that was a bad experience. But to me, it's listening to those more quiet voices that come from deeper aspects of ourself that are saying like, I think there could be even more here. Just something feels like maybe there must be more than what I'm experiencing, and it can still be fun and playful and pleasurable, and yet maybe there's also something else that I'm not getting.
Yeah, I think that it, because If I think about when, like in my 20s, when I was really insecure and would not ever ask for what I wanted and probably even did more stuff that I didn't want to do just because I was a people pleaser, that I never really thought about it. Like when I work with clients too, I'm like, lots of clients are like, yeah, I'm having sex and it's okay or it's great or they think it's fine. But I think for myself, the biggest transition was when I started to like learn these tools and then I was actually able to use them. Then I was like, oh, sex got a lot better. And it could be that in that space where I'm like, oh, I know what I like. And when I go into this situation, if it's something that's making me uncomfortable, or I just, maybe it's something like I can't bottom today, that I'm going to be able to, at least for on my end, be able to advocate for myself that I'm going to have a good experience, which means a good experience can be like, oh, we didn't even have sex. We cuddled or we just laid there and talked, right? Like that's a good experience. Like even when I work with clients, I always, so many times they come in and they have an issue with the way their body looks, size of their dick, staying hard too often, can't come, whatever, like all these other things. And I'm like, okay, great. And then I have a session with them and I'm like, that was great. Like I felt amazing. And I'll just say things like, I noticed though, like you're apologizing a lot for like, and I want you to just be because I'm fine. And so I'm teaching these skills. But I was like, that was still a wonderful experience. And like all this stuff that you think matters doesn't. The experience of like, did we connect? Yeah, he was super nice. He was a great guy. Like, I really enjoyed just spending time with him. Like, that's how I think I look at hookups is like, I would really love to just connect. And I'm like, I love the process of getting to know someone. And I'm a bit more of like a demisexual, right? So, like, all that stuff turns me on way more than just being like the randomness or the one-off grinder hookups, which are great too. But for me, it's like I need that. I love that depth that like gets me turned on and aroused.
Beautiful. Yeah, for me, I feel like Grinder used to feel like a huge slot machine. And sometimes I would meet someone and like the sparks would fly and the chemistry was amazing. And it was just like, wow. And then a lot of times it wouldn't. And it's just kind of like, okay, it's you perfunctory and you kind of just go through the motions and then you move on to the next one. And I think developing a lot of erotic skills and erotic intelligence really helped me to navigate those experiences better so that like no matter what the initial chemistry is, because chemistry is important, but it's also not everything, that I could still navigate the experience to get the most out of it no matter what. So it's rather than being just like super attached to the fantasy or the story that we've written in our Grinder chat or who I want this person to be, it's like, okay, what's actually happening between us right now? How is the energy flowing? What actually feels really alive? And how can we listen and navigate this to a place where we can still enjoy the pleasure, enjoy the connection that's available, rather than just be really disappointed because this wasn't amazing. So it helps. And I think also appreciate like the uniqueness of each connection because you're kind of savoring more of what's actually there.
Well, I think that's one of the issues that, gay men or maybe all men, but gay men, just speaking from what I know, is that because we are very, like, a lot of us are performative and we do what we see in porn, but like, you can't do that with every single man because not every single person is going to like what you're doing. And so, what I find is that I can tell when someone is going into their performance or what they think I'll like, but I'm like clearly like this is just not I'm not connecting with this and they can't tell from my body language. That's okay. And so I'm feeling a bit disconnected. And that's all okay. But like even so when I work with clients, I used to really try to like wrap my head around like why they were coming and be prepared and like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and be like prepared to the minute. And then I realized I was like, well, if you haven't met the person, and even if I already had this person as a client before, I know that whatever they're feeling in that moment or whoever this person is, I just have to feel it out in the moment. So the more I can just like stay in touch with my body and be like, okay, let's just feel it out and see what happens and not try to prepare anything of what it's going to be like because you don't know what this person's going to need in that moment. And then I'm like, hey, whatever, just go with the flow of whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in that. And it's so helpful to just slow the whole process down.
Mm-hmm.
Again, especially if we're having grinder hookups. But even if it's someone, you're in a relationship with or you play with regularly, we often just kind of like turn the switch on and then like the machine's running. And to really slow down helps us to actually feel what's alive right now. How am I really feeling right now? What do I really want right now? What's alive in our connection? Because, you could be playing with your lover, and from hour to hour or day to day, you're going to feel differently with one another. So it's like, what actually feels real with us right now? And being able to name that, then I think, again, helps us drop into this deeper layer of intimacy. Uh, yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. I was also going to say, like, do you see, not just in your own life, but other gay men that you know, but do you think that we really prioritize the intimacy or the romantic intimacy over just the intimacy with our other gay friends?
Just to make sure I understand. So I think that we prioritize like sex or romantic partners over friendships?
It doesn't even have to, I mean, you could have sex with your friends, right? Like whatever your situation is with the people around you. But I think that I always tell guys too that, especially guys who want to be in a relationship or want a boyfriend or whatever, that I might practice the intimacy part with your friends. Like you already have people that are in your life that you can start like practicing this stuff on, right? And whether that's even just affection, being able to be like, hey, I'm actually gonna give my friend a hug. I'm actually gonna tell my friend I appreciate them, right? Or I'm going to actually say to my friend, hey, that thing you did the other day kind of hurt my feelings, right? Like, I'm like, you have the access to do all that stuff now. Cause that's, I think, what you're wanting by saying, like, I want a boyfriend, I want a relationship, because there's something missing out of all the intimacy from your friend groups. Like, for me, I'm like, cause having uh, a, a boyfriend or a partner isn't something that like I have total control over all the time, right? And that's why I think our friendships are, maybe more important sometimes, but I think that we don't go into that intimacy part like all the stuff we're talking about with our friends, and we're not realizing that we have that potential for intimacy already there that we haven't tapped into. And maybe that's like just a man thing in general, right? That men aren't really close unless it's like the sexual thing or with a partner.
Yeah, I see that. And what I think is really beautiful about queer folks is many of us do have like chosen family with whom we are quite intimate. I've been single much more than I've been in a relationship in my adult life. And my friends are people who I'm very, very close to. And I see this also with straight friends of mine, for example, who choose not to have children or who aren't in partnerships, that like these friend networks are so important. And I think there often is an opportunity to deepen intimacy there. Again, with like really revealing ourselves, with having those open, honest, vulnerable conversations with one another. Yeah, I guess I see this as like one of the really beautiful things about queer folks is either from necessity or just the way that we choose to design our lives, that we get to choose who we have intimacy with, and we don't need to be bound by the script that, oh, it's only my romantic partner.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too the want or desire for like a romantic boyfriend partnership sometimes can come from this place of we were lied to when like society told us like, oh, if you find your one and only you'll be fine, and right. And I think a lot of people too get into a relationship with one person, expect all of their intimacy to come from that one person. And so I always say like that's just that's going to be trouble because that one person can't do that. And so again, I think it's just sometimes we're like, are you actually wanting to connect with that person, or are you wanting to feel less lonely? And are you wanting to depend on someone else and have that one person kind of makes it feel more like, okay, I got someone, now I'll be okay.
Yeah, I think we get into a lot of relationships because we don't want to be lonely. And I don't want to like delegitimize that. Like that's a very like real place of desire and longing,
Uh-huh.
and the pain of being single when we have that deep longing for partnership, it hurts. I really want to validate that for people who really want a relationship, but for whatever reason have struggled to find it. I do think there's other places in our life where we can find that closeness and that emotional support And I would really encourage people to develop like robust, resilient networks of people around them whom they can lean on. And also just to acknowledge that dating is hard. Dating is hard no matter your gender, no matter your sexual orientation. Like, we live in a world that is increasingly individualistic. And I've lived in some of the most gay, queer cities in the world. And dating is always hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in the dating app world, right? I mean, and social media ties into that too, right? But it's this place where we can curate who we are. Whereas, however many years ago, you actually had to be like, oh, I have to go up to that person and say hi. And that's why I find too that it's like, even if we are in those public spaces, sometimes there's that skill that we're losing to be able to just be like, I'm just going to go over to that guy and say hi. And if he rejects me, that's okay, whatever. I would rather go and know if he's into me or not. Whereas, like, behind the screen, where I'm going to post the 4 best photos of myself and, like, only say the things I want people to know and think and have the time to, like, curate every response to this person, right? It's like, and eventually you will get to that place where you're going to have to be yourself if you make it that far. But there's also something just being like, I'm going to be awkward and anxious and just do this.
And it's so cute. It's so
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah. I mean, again, this is why I love workshops, because I find workshops are like laboratories where we get to practice things and like rehearse. And it's a space where you can just approach someone and be like, "Hey, I think you're cute," or "Hey, can I make out with you?" or whatever it is that you want.
Hmm.
You get to practice speaking your desires, and we do that in formal practices, but it's also just a space where you get to meet other guys who probably have similar values to you. And that is just a practice. And I would say like the number one fear that guys have when they come into like a tantra workshop is of rejection. But this is hard. Like, again, queer people, we carry a lot of wounding around belonging. I spent
Hmm.
so many years of my life like desperately searching for where do I belong? And even in groups of other gay men where we often feel we should belong here, it can feel the most isolating. And so there's good reason why this is scary. And there's good reasons why it feels a lot safer to just be behind an app and curate, how people perceive you. But when we get to just practice like being ourselves and being real and being authentic and being awkward, it's so freaking cute. And people find it really attractive. I've
Yeah.
talked to so many friends who are like, "Oh my God, I think that guy's really cute." And I'm like, "Go talk to him." They're like, "Oh, but what if he's not interested?" I'm like, "The fact that you went up to approach him will make you 10 times hotter."
Yeah.
We don't do this anymore. And it's so nice to like have someone approach you and to feel really wanted and like, wow, okay, wow, this guy, like, he has guts. He came and talked to me. It makes you very attractive when you take that risk.
It totally does. And I will also say that I've been on the end where the person has like awkwardly tried to say like reject me. But I also say too that like I've never had a situation where someone is like, you want my number? Go fuck yourself. Like I'm like most people are like, okay, yeah, sure. I actually have a boyfriend, or they'll be like, actually, yeah, like I'm not interested. I've had that before. And so I'm like, okay, most people are as nice as they can be. And it's kind of awkward and it feels a little awkward, but at least my thing is always I'd rather go up to this person, say I'm into you, or like, hey, would you want to hang out sometime and get a no and know that I can move on than being in my head the whole time being like, oh, is he looking at me? Is he looking at me? And or should I go? I would love to go hang out with him. I'd love to go say hi. It's like I just want to get this done and over with, and then find out what if this guy is actually into me.
Yeah, I feel one of the most valuable journeys that many gay men go on is decoupling our self-worth from who wants us. This is so deeply intertwined in our consciousness that my status is directly related to who wants to have sex with me. And when we can decouple those things and actually have this like deep sense of our integrity and our worthiness as a human being, it makes it so much easier to navigate these situations, because the reality is not everybody wants you, but some
Yeah.
people will. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You know, like you are an incredibly beautiful human being who is deeply worthy of being loved. And the more we can like rest in that fact, then we get to play more. It gives us so much more freedom to actually pursue people who we want because it doesn't feel so important. Like it doesn't feel so high stakes that, oh my God, what if they don't want me back? They don't want you back. Guess what? There are billions of people in the
Yeah. And I think it was like for me, it was also a journey of like figuring out what I actually liked. Cause I think, and I still will feel that attraction towards guys that, that I'm like, why am I actually attracted to this guy besides the fact that he looks perfect or whatever, or being like, oh, because he has a perfect body and all that? Because I've had sex with enough people to know that that's not going to tell me if I'm going to have great sex with this person. So I can be like, yeah, that person is really pretty. But I've started to notice that I'm like, oh, I'm actually really attracted to like if there's a guy talking about like social issues or politics, I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of a turn on for me. And realizing that I'm like, oh, I actually like guys that are a bit more of themselves, that aren't afraid to um speak their mind. And I'm like, oh, all that stuff is really hot and actually shows me a bit more than like, oh, actually maybe we can find some sort of connection that will be really great between us, because I'm like, oh, those are the things that I liked. I think I was just liking or wanting hot guys to fuck me before, because I was like, oh, gives me the sense of like, if this guy fucks me, then like I must be good enough because I think he's better than me. And so I was like, well, that's not like, that's coming from a different place than being like, I want to play and connect.
It's so validating. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It in my experience, like we live in a society that so reifies the importance of physical attractiveness. It's hard to like fully root that one out of your consciousness. Like I think this is a decades long journey for us because it's constantly being reinforced that no, actually this is the most important thing. But what I find so beautiful is in Tantra's really all about working with our energy to open up, to melt some of like the barriers that we place around ourselves. And these are the barriers that keep us from having like the deep, meaningful, connected intimacy that many of us really want. And when you see guys who've been on the tantric path for many years, they often have this energetic openness that makes them incredibly attractive. Like they have this radiance about them, and there's an openness of sharing who they are and sharing love really generously with other people that you're magnetized to them. It's like you want to be in their presence because you can feel like the easefulness and the safety and the warmth that they exude. And so this is something that I always like emphasize is like no matter what your body looks like, the more that we connect with our hearts and the more that we put that out in the world in such a generous way, people find that so attractive.
Well, I think it also creates a level of safety with the people that you're around, right? Like if someone is being really kind and generous to me, I'm going to feel pretty safe and like, wow, this person's really nice. That feels really good, right? To be kind and generous and to even see people, like even when, God, I don't know, just any room that I'm in with multiple people, I always make an effort to see people. Like I know how it feels to be like in a room where you're like, I don't know anybody, but no one's paying attention or no one is coming up to you and saying like, oh, hey, what's your name, by the way? And so I'm just kind of awkwardly like, is someone going to introduce me? And like the difference it makes when someone new has popped in and you're like, oh, hey, I haven't met you before. What's your name? Like all that stuff, that generosity creates a, wow, this person sees me. Even in that like little moment, it does create this level of like, wow, this person sees me. They're really kind. It's like a small step to being able to maybe open up more or like keep the connection going.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those small things do make a huge difference. And I'm reminded I was talking with a friend today about presence. And I personally am extremely attracted to men who have a lot of presence because there's some people who you might have experienced where like they walk into a room and you can feel that somehow they're the center of attention. And it's not because of their physical appearance. that there's just something about them that has this really magnetic quality. And to me, that is presence. And again, with Tantra, like what you often find is Tantra is about connecting with our life force energy. And so the more we cultivate our sexual energy or our life force energy, the more you see people who just seem on fire for life. Like they just have this incredible aliveness about them. And it's often people we see, and there's like, fuck, I want that. Oh my God. Like, that there's this like passion and openness and curiosity because they're so connected. And yeah, to me, this is where like I'm always in trying to invite people into is this space of like you can be saying nothing in the room actually, and people will feel your presence. Like people will feel that this is someone who I want to be around. And I think those are really compelling. That's compelling for me at least.
What is like, do you have daily practices to connect to whatever, if that's Tantra or if that's just meditation, or like, what are your daily practices that you do to connect to that aliveness?
I do like a sitting meditation, and there's several stages. I do some body awareness meditation, just noticing what's happening in my body, and then also connecting with my energy and connecting with like the central channel of energy in my body. So in Tantra, this is like running from our crown down to our root, and this connects all of our chakras together. And then also practice to allow my consciousness to rest. And this is something I really struggle with because I can be very like in the mind, especially on the phone, on the devices, thinking, thinking, thinking. And so this opportunity to rest the consciousness, my consciousness, opens up just a bit more spaciousness in my being. And it allows me to be more connected to my heart, and it allows me to be more open as I move through the world.
Yeah. And obviously that connection that when you work with other guys or when you're even just having sex, hooking up, right? Do you see that as like the practice to opening yourself up?
Yes. For me, like sex is always, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say an experiment.
Experience.
It's certainly an experience. I would say sex is a place where I meet myself actually quite a lot. It's a place where I have these really intense mirrors, and I can notice like how am I showing up in this experience with my partner. And I used to, let's say, put a lot of the responsibility on my partner. It's kind of on them to give me a good experience or to like meet my needs or to fulfill my fantasy or to read my mind or whatever that is. And I'm really working now on like taking more responsibility for how am I showing up to this experience? Yeah, showing up to the dance, if you will. So sex is always this like really strong reflection of where am I right now? Am I open? Am I closed? How am I feeling? How's my energy? And then I learn things about myself through that experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's when I work with clients, that's not like what I'm hoping for, but I think what I see is when those moments come up when I see the guy is maybe not open, which looks like he's in his head or feeling anxious and maybe his body feels a bit stuck. But I want those moments because those are like the opportunities, right? To be like, oh, okay, what can we connect? What do you need in this moment? What are you feeling? Like, have you just never been able to express that, oh, I feel really insecure about my body or I feel really awkward about sex? And it's like you said, right? Like, it's okay to be awkward. It's cute. Like, I always am like, I just want you to be yourself in this moment. And it comes back to that. The things that you're in your head about, like, they don't matter. Like, I want you to connect with me in this moment. I'm not, here to, uh, for you to please me and make sure that my pleasure is more important than yours. It's like we can just connect in this moment. That stuff comes up and like that's how do we work through it? And how does that
Yeah.
moment become important to the experience of what we're doing?
Yeah, being caught in our heads is so incredibly common, especially for men. Personally, I find this question or like invitation to be yourself kind of a hard one because I immediately go into my mind of like, well, who am I supposed to be? Like it immediately like invites for me this kind of like mental self-reflection, and then I get caught in this like mind trap. And for me, what I'm really inviting people is to be in their bodies, to actually be in the felt sense of what we're experiencing in our bodies, because our bodies are always in the present. Our mind is always thinking about something outside of ourselves, and the body is always in the present moment. And so I'm most interested in like, what are you feeling in your body right now? That means your emotions, sensations, felt senses of things, energy. And this is a skill that really takes a while to develop, but is so transformative and so foundational. Once we can actually start feeling what's happening in our body, that question of like, hey, just be yourself, it's like, hey, how are you feeling? Be that.
Hmm. Well, the be yourself thing, I think people get, especially the word authenticity. I think that people think of it as like, oh, I came out as gay. Now I'm authentic. And it's like, it's not really like, I mean, maybe there's a piece of that that's like, yeah, for sure, your authenticity, but authenticity is more of the practice in the moment, like you just said, where it's, you know, I'm not asking you to come to bed and like talk to me about all your interests, everything you're in love with. I'm like, the authenticity is like, what are you feeling in the moment? So if you say, I'm actually in my head right now. Can we slow down? That's authentic. Like, that's what I want for you to be yourself, is to be able to say what you need and your desire and what you're feeling in the moment. So,
Mm.
like, to say, if I say, oh, how does this feel? Can I do anything to make this better? And someone's like, no, it feels good. Thanks. I'm like, that didn't feel authentic. So it's like,
Mm.
if it feels really good, I feel like you should have been like, oh, it feels so good. And like, it was like, okay, I'm feeling like you're just saying that to be nice, right? And so it's like, that is the practice of be yourself, is like, how can you in that moment? And I always tell guys too, is like, the homework that I give them is just whenever you remember it in the day to do this, is like, just take one deep breath and be like, what am I feeling?
Mhm.
And that's it. And just remind yourself to do that like throughout the day. And it's this practice that you can kind of keep coming back to. It doesn't have to be this whole like you have to set out the yoga mat, and it's like just always check in every once in a while, and you can get better at being able to build that awareness.
Yes. Yeah. And I think once we have that awareness, it does become like a sixth sense, and we don't have to put so much effort into like consciously checking, but it just becomes part of our field of awareness, that it's like, I can sense that something's off because let's say the data is flowing. When we're in our heads, it's almost like there's something chopped off here, and like the data is not kind of getting up to the brain. And so when that comes online, then we often have a more intuitive awareness of what might be happening for us. And then that might flag, like, oh, yeah, actually, let me take a second to check in with my body because something feels kind of off here.
Yeah, and that's how like sex can also be any, well, not even just sex, but anything where you're with another person is can be this practice of, hey, am I going to be authentic and say how I'm feeling? And of course, different situations, like, you're not going to be authentic all the time, depending on who you're talking to and all that. But I mean, I do this where, someone will check in with me and ask how I'm doing, and I'll feel like shit. And I'm like, do I say that? And sometimes it's like, no, I'm not close to that person. That's not this type of conversation. But when there's opportunities where I'm like, yeah, this guy actually does care about me and is checking in on me, like, am I going to actually say how I feel? And that's like the practice too. And it's really hard in relationships, right? Like for myself, I feel pretty confident that I am good at being able to check in with myself and be self-aware of what I'm feeling. But I think as a man, I hate asking for help. So like I hate saying to someone, I'm not doing well and I need help. Like it is so hard for me to do that stuff, and hard for all of us, right? Because of all that other stuff that comes in. What if they don't receive that? What if they don't even respond to that, right? And like all these things come into it. And so I struggle with like keeping it safe and being like, well, I know I'm struggling, but I'll just keep it to myself and I'll deal with it myself, because I don't want to be a burden on anyone. I don't want to, want to make anyone feel bad for me.
Yeah, a lot of what you're speaking to is this like two-sided coin of naming our wants, needs, and desires, and also having boundaries and limits. And if we're relating to someone and we don't trust that they'll hold their boundaries, makes it really hard for us to authentically express our desires, because I might assume that they're going to go into people pleasing mode. I can't really trust them to say no. And similarly, if we can't say no to people, they're not going to trust us very much. We might develop some nice codependent dynamics, but we're probably not going to trust each other to go into this more authentic place of relating. And so I do think that part of this discernment is discerning who are the people in my life who I know are able to actually hold boundaries, because the more that they're able to say no to me, the more I can ask them for things, and the more I can trust that, like, hey, this is someone who, when they say, yes, I'm willing to help you, I know that they're really willing to help me because they care about me and they're not just doing this out of a sense of obligation.
I was watching Oprah's podcast like a couple weeks ago or something, and one of the guys brought up about this, like setting the boundary, that he's like, if I don't say like an immediate yes and like feel it with my body, like if I have to like sit on it and think about it, then it's like, okay, well, you maybe don't want, maybe this is a no, right? And I think that's too when I talk to guys about all this, like even sex skills of asking for what you want and being okay with it. Like, if you want it, I actually, when I help guys with bottoming, the way that I teach them to like, because I think a lot, obviously, a lot of guys get in their head and they can't relax. That I'm like, when you should want to get fucked, like it should be a body experience. Because if you're like, some guys like, I want to fuck you, and you're like, okay, and then you're getting all tense and anxious in your head, it's like, well, that's your body being like, I don't know if I can do this. No, right? But a lot of us are like, well, I want to please this person, so I'm going to do it. And so it's getting aware of that, like not going into your head and overthinking if this is a yes or no, but being like, what is your body saying in this moment? Is your body saying yes?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, developing boundaries for myself in sex has been so challenging, and I'm so happy with where I am
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
But I was often that person who was bottoming for guys who I didn't really trust. And on the journey of then trying to speak my needs out, doing it with guys who weren't receptive or weren't always kind, which was really difficult. And so I do think this place of discernment is like, if I'm learning new skills and I'm trying to be more vulnerable with people, who's someone I can trust, who I can be in this exploration with together? And maybe naming up front, like, hey, I would really love to have a sexual experience with you. I'm really trying to like do this new thing, which is saying no. Could we just make an agreement that like I can say no to anything and it's going to be okay?
yeah,
And that this experience will kind of be for me. And I think that can be very edgy to ask for, because we want to assume that like sex is always kind of mutually beneficial. But to be able to actually name with someone, like, I would really like an experience that's for me because I'm trying to do this new thing that's hard and scary. And it would be so helpful to do that with someone who's supporting me. A, whoever has like a full-throated yes to that is a great person to play with. If
yeah,
they're
yeah,
like, yeah, I really want to support you in this. Wow, that's already deepening your intimacy. And then you get to have this space to practice, because it is awkward and it is hard. And
yeah.
so, like, how do we set ourselves up to do that well?
Yeah. And I think also it's like what you said, something about like any no will be okay. That like even in the bottoming example, I always tell guys, you're in control. Like as soon as you start to be like, I'm just gonna let him go whatever speed and how hard he wants him, like just remember you're in control. You can speak up and say, I need to go slow. You can be the one that's setting the pace and for what you need. And just remembering that will also give you a sense of feeling of like, I'll be safe because I know I'm going to say those boundaries of what feels good and what doesn't feel good. But I guess slowly start to wrap it up. But I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think if someone is like, I don't feel like I have any intimacy in my life, I want deeper relationships, like, where do you think someone should start?
I mean, I'm biased because I run group
Yeah.
events.
Yeah.
But the reason that I love group events is because I think this is actually like the fastest way to grow. Group workshops, festivals, there's festivals in the US, in Canada, in Europe. These are spaces where we get to meet other men who also want similar things as us. And as you and I have been sharing, that's not always so easy. It's not always super easy to find other gay guys who are like, I want to have a lot of integrity,
Yeah.
and so just being in a space where there's other guys who want that, who want intimacy, who want connection, who want to be authentic, who will appreciate the journey that I'm on because they're on a journey of their own. That to me is a huge step. And festivals are actually a great place to start because we often have short workshops, 2 to 3 hours, maybe less, where you get to like taste things. And it's often very playful and very silly and very fun. And so we get to connect with other men in ways that we don't often. Like play is one of the best entry points into intimacy. And it's something that as adults, we very rarely do. So just being able to be silly and laugh automatically opens up this connection because we get to be seen in, again, a more authentic version of ourselves. So I always suggest festivals. As I said, I'm teaching at the Tantra Love Experience in New York in October, and there's going to be tons of workshops where you'll be guided into having these deep, intimate connections with other men, and then experiences where you just get to play, you just get to be silly and have fun.
And I think even with the play and be silly thing, like that made me think of just like dancing, which a lot of us just struggle with feeling comfortable in our bodies dancing. And it's like we learned at some point that this wasn't okay and like you're a grown up and you can't play. So, I mean, lots of people are drunk when they're dancing, but like if you're sober, if like you're doing something like ecstatic dance, it's like you have to teach your body again to be like, hey, I'm playing and laughing and everyone else is okay with it and they're doing it too. And I think that's a great thing about like retreats and these workshops is that like it can be something small, like just getting people to be a bit more vulnerable, but also seeing it safe to feel joy and pleasure without feeling like you need to earn it. And
Yeah,
then
and
all
to
the
be in
other stuff. Yeah, like the walls kind of keep come down after that, after you're like, oh, I did something that was a little bit scary and actually it was okay.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's so powerful to be in spaces that celebrate our authenticity because then you get to see a bunch of other people who are also being really authentic. And it gives so much permission that, like, I don't have to be normal. I don't have to be just like everybody else. Look, I can be me. They're
Mm-hmm.
weird.
Yeah,
Humans are
yeah,
weird,
yeah,
Oh my God, I can be weird too. What a relief.
yeah.
So I think the more we can immerse ourselves in communities, spaces, cultures where people really celebrate our authentic expression, the more we get these deep layers of permission that like, yeah, we want you to be you. That's what we want here.
And look, I think also look for those spaces, like you said, about where it's okay to be authentic. But there's lots of spaces. If you see, especially with gay men, you'll see there's a lot of spaces and things like events and parties where I'm like, oh, everyone looks the same. And it's like, maybe this isn't the place that's promoting authenticity, right? So look for these groups. And a lot of like workshops and the things that we do are about authenticity. But there are things like go to an ecstatic dance class, go to a yoga class that has a different group of people, try new things where they're like, wow, there's different genders, different sexualities, different body shapes. Like there's people that don't all look the same. That's like, oh, maybe this is a space that's about authenticity.
Yeah, often they'll name it. It's like if
Yeah.
if its space celebrates authenticity, it'll be in the description or it'll be in the title. And these are often sober spaces, and I think that's really important that yeah, it's a space where we get to be ourselves without any intoxicants.
Yeah. And that's the practice in itself, right? For a lot of us is to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I have one more question for you before we finish. What are you most excited for in your life right now?
Oh, well, I'm running my first events in Berlin starting next month in May. And this has been a dream of mine for many, many years. Berlin is a city I've had a long, complicated relationship with, mostly because it is a place of such freedom. And there's so many people here who I think are leading really like radically unique lives. And it's always had this pull on me. So to be able to offer work here there's a really, really big queer community here, this is like super, super exciting for me. So I'm looking to further build up an audience here and continuing opening spaces for queer men to come and connect from the heart.
As a tantra workshops then?
Yes. Yeah, I'm running like an intro to Tantra. I'm running a workshop just for gay couples. We don't have many spaces for gay couples to really come back to the heart of our connection into that felt sense of love. And so this is a really beautiful day for couples to reconnect as well.
Well, that's awesome. Good for you. It seems like you got a great life going on there in Berlin.
Thanks, Vance. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And thank you.
My pleasure.